The vastness of space stretched out before the viewport of the Imperial flagship Dominion. Stars glimmered like distant beacons across the void, each representing another outpost of the Galactic Empire's might. General Arkin stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the cosmic ballet with practiced indifference. After 3 centuries of unchallenged rule, the Empire had become the natural order of things, as fundamental as gravity, as inevitable as entropy. Status report. Arkin commanded, his voice carrying the weight of decades of military service. He didn't turn to address his subordinates. They would respond promptly. They always did. All sectors clear, General, replied Commander Zorva, her voice crisp with efficiency. The patrol fleet reports no unusual activity in the Outer Rim territories. The native uprising on Proxima 3 has been quelled, and the mining operations have resumed at 110% capacity. Arkin nodded slightly. The Empire's efficiency was legendary. Rebellion was met with swift, overwhelming force. Compliance was rewarded with the privilege of serving the greater good. It was a system that had worked flawlessly for generations. The general allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. The command bridge of the Dominion was a testament to Imperial might. Spanning nearly 200 meters across, it housed hundreds of officers managing the intricate operations of not just this capital ship, but the entire fleet under Arkin's command. Massive view screens displayed tactical information from across a sector that spanned hundreds of star systems. 57 inhabited worlds, each contributing resources, troops, and fealty to the Empire. General, began Strategic Officer Thalen, approaching with a data tablet. The quarterly intelligence reports from the frontier zones have arrived. Arkin accepted the tablet with mild curiosity. These reports rarely contained anything of interest, just the usual catalog of minor infractions, smuggling operations, and occasional pirate activity. The Empire's borders were vast, but well-policed. Anything worth my attention? He asked, already scrolling through the summary. Nothing significant, sir. The usual skirmishes with the Andari Confederacy along the northern edge, though they withdrawn after we deployed the 3rd battle group. There are some reports about increased activity in the human territories, but intelligence considers it negligible. Arkin paused. Humans. The word was tinged with mild amusement. What are they up to now? Building another orbital platform they think we won't notice. Thalen allowed himself a small chuckle. Something like that, sir. Apparently, they've increased their military production by 27% over the last decade. Intelligence believes they're responding to our expansion into the Centauri sector. Hardly worth noting, Arkin said dismissively. The humans have been building up their forces for a century now. They barely have interstellar capabilities worth the name. The Empire had categorized Earth and its handful of colony worlds as a Class C civilization, technically capable of interstellar travel but lacking the resources, technology, or political unity to be considered a significant power. Humans were useful as labor on some frontier worlds, but otherwise beneath serious consideration in the grand game of galactic politics. Indeed, sir, Thalen agreed. Though there are some intelligence assets suggesting they've made technological advances that our previous assessments didn't account for. Arkin handed the tablet back with a dismissive gesture. The day I worry about human military capabilities is the day I tender my resignation. They're centuries away from being anything but a footnote in our expansion records. The conversation was interrupted by a soft chime from the tactical station. Lieutenant Varen, a young officer with a reputation for thoroughness, frowned at his display. Sir, we're detecting an anomaly at the edge of our sensor range. Bearing 147 by 33, approximately 12 light minutes out. Arkin didn't immediately respond. Anomalies were common enough in deep space. Rogue asteroids, sensor ghosts caused by radiation, or occasionally unregistered merchant vessels taking shortcuts through restricted Imperial space. Classification, he finally asked. Unknown, sir. It's not broadcasting any Imperial recognition codes, and its profile doesn't match our records of known civilian or commercial vessels. It's small, but the energy signature is unusual. Now Arkin turned, his interest mildly piqued. Unusual how, Lieutenant? The power output is significantly higher than what we'd expect from a vessel of that size. And it appears to be using some form of energy shielding that's causing our sensors difficulty in obtaining a clear reading. Commander Zorva moved to the tactical station, studying the readings over Varen's shoulder. Could be a sensor malfunction, she suggested, or perhaps a smuggler with modified systems. Either way, Arkin said, straightening his already impeccable uniform, we should investigate. Dispatch a scout vessel. Class 3 should be sufficient. Yes, General, Zorva acknowledged, already relaying the orders. The scout ship, a sleek, arrow-shaped vessel designed for speed and stealth rather than confrontation, detached from the Dominion's docking bay and accelerated toward the anomaly. On the command bridge, a dedicated screen displayed the scout ship's perspective, transmitted in real time despite the light lag. Approaching target, reported the scout commander's voice over the comm. Still no response to hails on standard frequencies. Visual confirmation in 30 seconds. The bridge crew watched in professional silence as the distance closed. The anomaly resolved into a definite ship silhouette, compact, with an unusual configuration that didn't match Imperial design philosophies. Can we get a better visual? Arkin requested, leaning forward slightly. The image sharpened as the scout ship adjusted its sensors. What they saw caused a ripple of surprise to pass through the bridge. That can't be right, Lieutenant Varen muttered. The vessel was unmistakably of human design, but not the crude, utilitarian craft that Imperial intelligence reports had documented. This ship was sleek, with obvious weapon emplacements and what appeared to be advanced thruster configurations. Most disturbing of all, it bore military markings, not the logo of any Earth corporation or the flag of a terrestrial nation, but the unified emblem of something called the Terran Defense Force. Initiating standard challenge procedure, the scout commander reported, warning them that they're in violation of Imperial space, and the transmission suddenly flared with static. When it cleared seconds later, the image showed the scout ship tumbling, emergency lights flashing across its hull. "We're hit," came the panicked voice of the commander. "Some kind of energy weapon, cut right through our forward shields. Stabilizers offline, weapons non-responsive." Arkin's expression hardened. "What happened?" "They fired on our scout without warning," Commander Zorva reported, her voice tight with incredulity. "A single shot disabled their primary systems." "Impossible," Arkin declared. "Human weapons technology isn't capable of penetrating Imperial shields, even on a scout vessel." Yet the evidence was playing out before them. The scout ship's distress beacon had activated automatically, and damage reports were streaming in. The weapon had been precise, disabling rather than destroying, but its effectiveness was undeniable. "General," Strategic Officer Thalen spoke up, his voice carefully controlled, "I believe we should consider battle stations. This vessel may not be alone." For a brief moment, Arkin hesitated. The notion that a human ship could present any real threat to an Imperial battle fleet was absurd. And yet, battle stations, he ordered, deploy the fleet in Formation Delta. All ships to raise shields and power weapon systems, but hold fire until my command. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with. The massive Imperial warships began to shift, their enormous engines glowing as they moved into a defensive configuration around the flagship. Weapon systems that could reduce a planet's surface to molten slag hummed to life, targeting systems acquiring locks on the small human vessel. "Shall we launch fighters, sir?" asked the fighter command coordinator. "Not yet," Arkin decided. "Let's not overcommit to what might still be an isolated incident. Hail that vessel again. All frequencies, all languages in our database. I want to know who they are and what they think they're doing." Minutes passed as the communications officers attempted to establish contact. Finally, one of them looked up. "Sir, we're receiving a response. Audio and visual." On screen, Arkin commanded. The main view screen shifted to show the interior of a human vessel. The command center was smaller than Imperial standard, but surprisingly advanced. Holographic displays, crew in what appear to be standardized military uniforms, in an atmosphere of professional discipline that Arkin hadn't expected. In the center stood a human male, approximately in his 5th decade of life by their standards. He wore a dark uniform with insignia that suggested high rank, and his posture conveyed both confidence and caution. "This is Captain James Darius of the Terran Defense Force vessel Intrepid," he stated without preamble. "You have entered a designated security zone of the Terran Alliance. Your scout ship ignored multiple warnings and approached with active targeting systems. We responded with appropriate defensive measures." Arkin was momentarily speechless. The audacity was almost impressive. A human, commanding a single ship, was speaking to an Imperial general as if they were equals, as if humanity had any claim to territory that the Empire hadn't expressly permitted them. "Captain Darius," Arkin replied, injecting his voice with the practiced condescension he reserved for lesser species. "I am General Arkin of the Imperial 7th Fleet. You are in violation of Imperial space, as established by the Galactic Concordance of the 7th Dynasty. Your attack on an Imperial vessel constitutes an act of war against the Galactic Empire. Power down your weapons, deactivate your shields, and prepare to be boarded." Darius's expression didn't change. "General, I'm transmitting our navigational charts and the officially registered boundaries of Terran space, as recognized by the Intergalactic Council 3 years ago. You'll note that your fleet is currently 2 light days inside our sovereign territory. We have no desire for conflict, but we will defend our borders." "Ridiculous," Arkin dismissed. "The Empire recognizes no such claim. The Intergalactic Council has no authority to redraw territorial boundaries without Imperial consent." Nevertheless, Darius continued calmly, "Those are the recognized boundaries. We request that you withdraw your forces beyond the marked perimeter. We're prepared to escort your damaged scout vessel to the border." Commander Zorva had moved to Arkin's side, speaking quietly. "Sir, we're detecting additional energy signatures. They were masked somehow, but they're becoming visible now." Arkin's eyes narrowed. "How many?" "At least 7 distinct vessels, sir. Smaller than our cruisers, but their energy signatures are significant." On the view screen, Captain Darius seemed to note their distraction. "As you can see, General, the Intrepid is not alone. This is a standard border patrol group. Again, we have no hostile intentions provided Imperial forces respect our territorial sovereignty." Arkin felt a flicker of genuine anger. This was beyond presumptuous. It was an insult to everything the Empire represented. Humans, with their brief lifespans and their fractious history, daring to challenge the order that had maintained peace across countless worlds for centuries. "Captain Darius," he replied coldly, "the Empire does not recognize your claims, your borders, or your authority. You will stand down immediately or face the consequences of your defiance." Without waiting for a response, Arkin cut the transmission. "Target the lead vessel. 4 batteries only. I want a measured response. Demonstrate our superiority without destroying them completely." "Yes, General," the weapons officer acknowledged. The massive forward cannons of the Dominion aligned with the distant human ship. Energy built within the weapon systems, creating a visible glow at the emitter points. "Fire," Arkin commanded. Brilliant beams of concentrated energy lanced across space toward the human vessel. Under normal circumstances, such an attack would have overwhelmed the shields of anything short of another Imperial capital ship. But the Intrepid moved with surprising agility. Thrusters flared along its hull as it executed a maneuver that seemed impossibly precise, allowing the majority of the energy beams to pass harmlessly by. Those that did connect were met with shields that flared brightly but held. "Direct hits," reported the weapons officer. "But minimal damage. Their shields absorbed most of the energy." "Impossible," Arkin muttered, though the evidence was before him. "Fire again, full forward battery." Before the order could be executed, the tactical officer called out, "Sir, the other human vessels are moving into attack formation. They're targeting our communication arrays and sensor clusters." Space lit up as the human ships opened fire simultaneously. Their weapons were different from Imperial standard. Not the expected brute force energy beams, but some kind of focused pulse technology that seemed designed to penetrate specific frequencies of Imperial shielding. Alarms blared across the Dominion as systems began to report damage. Not catastrophic, but precise communications, long-range sensors, targeting systems. They know our weaknesses, Commander Zorva realized aloud, her professional composure slipping for the first time. They're not trying to destroy us. They're systematically blinding and isolating our vessels. Arkin's mind raced. This was not how battles were supposed to unfold. The Empire won through overwhelming force, through the psychological impact of facing an invincible armada. These humans were fighting an entirely different kind of engagement. Surgical, precise, targeted. Launch all fighter squadrons, he ordered. Cruisers to form perimeter defense. I want those human ships surrounded and overwhelmed. Imperial fighters poured from the launch bays of the capital ships, hundreds of them swarming toward the human vessels like angry insects. The cruisers began to maneuver, attempting to create a sphere of firepower from which the smaller human ships couldn't escape. But the humans didn't attempt to escape. Instead, they executed what appeared to be a pre-planned response. Their formation split, each vessel taking a different vector, yet somehow maintaining a coordinated approach. They weaved between the Imperial cruisers, exploiting gaps in the formation, using the Empire's own ships as shields against each other's fire. The Intrepid itself headed directly for the Dominion, evading fire with maneuvers that should have torn a ship of its size apart under the strain. "How are they moving like that?" demanded Arkin. "Our tactical simulations show nothing in human technology that would allow such maneuverability." No one on the bridge had an answer. They could only watch as the human ships systematically disabled or destroyed Imperial fighters, avoiding direct confrontation with the capital ships while continuing to target their vulnerable systems. The battle that should have been over in minutes stretched into an hour. Imperial advantages in firepower and numbers were being methodically negated by human precision and apparent knowledge of Imperial tactical doctrine. Ships that had never been defeated were being forced into defensive postures, unable to coordinate effectively as their communications were jammed or destroyed. "General," Commander Zorva reported grimly, "we've lost contact with the Indomitable and the Sovereign. The humans have managed to isolate a third of our fleet from command structure." Arkin's knuckles were white as he gripped the tactical display. "This is not possible," he insisted, though reality continued to contradict him. "Bring the fleet into tighter formation. All remaining communications to switch to encrypted tight beam transmission. We need to re-establish control." A massive explosion rocked the Dominion, sending crew members tumbling. Emergency systems engaged, compensating for the sudden shift in the ship's orientation. "Direct hit to our main engine housing," reported the damage control officer. "We're operating at 60% thrust capacity. Shield generators 3 through 7 are offline." On the main view screen, the battle unfolded like a nightmare. Imperial ships, each designed to subjugate entire star systems, were being systematically crippled by vessels a fraction of their size. Not through superior firepower, but through a combination of precision, speed, and what appeared to be intimate knowledge of Imperial weaknesses. "Sir," called Lieutenant Varen from the tactical station, "the human vessels are forming up again. They appear to be preparing for another coordinated strike." "Where?" demanded Arkin. "Here, sir." "They're all converging on the Dominion." Arkin felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature. The humans had recognized the command vessel and were concentrating their efforts on decapitating the Imperial fleet. "All remaining weapons to focus on the approaching vessels," he ordered. "Divert power from non-essential systems to forward shields. Prepare for impact." The human ships came in fast, each approaching from a different vector, making it impossible to target them all effectively. They fired in perfect synchronization, not at the Dominion's weapons or engines, but at a seemingly random section of the hull. Except it wasn't random. As alarms screamed across the bridge, Strategic Officer Thalen looked up from his console with genuine fear in his eyes. "They targeted the shield generator nexus," he reported. The one vulnerability that shouldn't be in any non-Imperial database. Our shields are failing completely. Arkin stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The shield generator nexus was a design flaw that had been classified at the highest levels of Imperial security. It was considered acceptable because the information was so tightly controlled that no enemy could possibly know to target it. Yet these humans had done exactly that. General, Commander Zorva spoke urgently. We need to withdraw. We've lost tactical advantage. Our formations are broken, and we can't guarantee the flagship's safety. If we stay, we risk losing the entire fleet. The words burned in Arkin's throat like acid. In 3 decades of military service, he had never retreated, never acknowledged defeat. The very concept was alien to Imperial doctrine. But as another explosion rocked the ship, as more systems reported critical failure, reality became impossible to deny. The humans, the insignificant, underestimated humans, had achieved what no species had managed in centuries. They had defeated an Imperial battle fleet. Signal the retreat, Arkin ordered, each word feeling like a personal betrayal. All vessels to disengage and rendezvous at emergency coordinates. Maintain defensive posture during withdrawal. The order was transmitted, and across the battlefield, Imperial ships began to break off. Their engagements. Some were too damaged to comply, their engines or navigation systems disabled by the precision strikes. Others were completely out of communication, isolated by the human tactics. As the Dominion itself turned laboriously away from the battle, its damaged engine straining, a communication request flashed on the main view screen. "It's the human vessel, sir," reported the communications officer. "Captain Darius is hailing us." Arkin wanted to ignore it, to retreat with what dignity remained. But strategic necessity overcame pride. Put him through. Captain Darius appeared on screen again. Unlike before, there was visible damage to his bridge, panels sparking, crew members tending to injuries. But his composure remained intact. "General Arkin," he began, "your forces are in retreat, and we won't pursue beyond our territorial boundary. This conflict was unnecessary. We have no desire for war with the Empire." "Then you should not have provoked one," Arkin replied bitterly. "This incident will not be forgotten. The Empire does not tolerate defiance." Darius nodded solemnly. "We understand that. But understand this in return. Humanity will defend itself. We've spent decades preparing for this moment, studying your tactics, your technology, your weaknesses. We hoped it wouldn't be necessary, but we refuse to remain vulnerable. You've made a grave miscalculation," Arkin warned. "What you face today is merely a fraction of Imperial might. The response to this affront will be significant." "Perhaps," Darius acknowledged. "But consider this carefully, General. Today, you've learned that humans are not the primitive species your intelligence suggested. Before you commit to a wider conflict, you might want to ask yourself what else your empire has been wrong about." With that, the transmission ended, leaving Arkin staring at the stars as the Dominion limped away from the battlefield. The journey back to the Imperial outpost was conducted in a silence heavy with disbelief and recrimination. Damage reports continued to flow in, each one a testament to how thoroughly they had been outmaneuvered. Nearly a third of the fleet was lost, not destroyed, but disabled and left behind, their crews at the mercy of the humans. In his private quarters, Arkin reviewed the battle recordings, searching for some explanation, some flaw in human tactics that could be exploited in the inevitable next engagement. But what he saw only deepened his concern. The human ships had moved with coordination that suggested extensive training and preparation. Their attacks had been precisely targeted at vulnerabilities that should have been unknown outside the highest echelons of Imperial military command. A soft chime announced Commander Zorva's arrival. She entered with a formal salute, though the gesture seemed hollow in the aftermath of defeat. "The preliminary assessment is complete, General," she reported, handing him a data tablet. "The humans employed technology significantly beyond what our intelligence indicated they possessed. Their shields incorporated some form of adaptive frequency modulation that mitigated the effectiveness of our weapons. Their own weapons were designed specifically to penetrate Imperial defenses. Arkin scrolled through the report, his expression growing darker with each detail. This level of preparation suggests they've been planning this encounter for years, if not decades. But how? How did they obtain such detailed information about our systems? Zorva hesitated before answering. Intelligence is still investigating, sir. But there are theories. The humans have been permitted limited trade access to several Imperial worlds. They've also been employed in some of our less sensitive industrial operations. It's possible they've been gathering information systematically for longer than we realized. Spies and infiltrators, Arkin muttered. While we dismissed them as insignificant, they were studying us, learning our vulnerabilities. There's more, sir, Zorva continued reluctantly. Long-range scans of the region where we encountered the human vessels suggest extensive development. Space stations, defensive platforms, what appear to be shipyards. Significantly more than our previous intelligence indicated. Arkin set down the tablet, a cold realization settling in his gut. They've been building up their forces in secret. Waiting. Preparing. So it seems, sir. And we played directly into their hands, Arkin concluded bitterly. They wanted this confrontation. They wanted to demonstrate their capabilities without committing to full-scale war. What will happen now, sir? Zorva asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. Arkin moved to the viewport, gazing out at the stars that had once seemed to represent the unchallenged domain of the Empire. Now, for the first time in his life, those same stars harbored uncertainty. The Empire will respond, he said finally. It must. To allow this challenge to go unanswered would invite others. The Andari, the Valyrian collective, they're all watching, waiting to see if the Empire shows weakness. A full military response? Against a species that has just demonstrated the ability to defeat our most advanced fleet. Arkin turned back to face her. That decision will be made by the Imperial Command. Our duty now is to provide them with accurate information, something our intelligence services clearly failed to do before this encounter. The implications hung unspoken between them. Accurate information would mean acknowledging that humanity possessed technology, tactics, and determination that made them a genuine threat, something no Imperial officer had seriously considered possible. Prepare a full tactical analysis, Arkin ordered. Every detail of their ships, their weapons, their tactics. I want to know how they were able to coordinate so effectively, how they penetrated our security classifications to learn about our vulnerabilities. Yes, General, Zorva acknowledged. And the official report to Imperial Command? How will you characterize what happened here? Arkin's jaw tightened. The question cut to the heart of his professional pride, his decades of service to an empire he had believed invincible. The truth, Commander, however uncomfortable it may be, we engaged an enemy we had drastically underestimated, and we paid the price for that arrogance. After Zorva had departed, Arkin remained at the viewport, contemplating the vastness of space and the sudden uncertainty it contained. For centuries, the Empire had expanded unchallenged, encountering no species with both the capability and the will to resist Imperial dominion. The sheer scale of Imperial might had been enough to ensure compliance, even from civilizations with significant technological advancement. But humanity had done something unprecedented. They had studied their potential adversary in secret. They had developed technologies specifically designed to counter Imperial systems. And they had waited, building their strength until they were ready. The comlink on his desk chimed, interrupting his thoughts. General, came the voice of the communications officer. We've received a priority transmission from Imperial Center. The High Command is requesting your immediate report. The slight hesitation spoke volumes. In Imperial parlance, a request from High Command was an order that carried the implicit threat of severe consequences for failure. Inform them I'll transmit within the hour, Arkin replied. As he began to compose his report, Arkin faced the most difficult task of his career, explaining to the highest authorities of the Empire that the established order of the galaxy had fundamentally changed. Humanity was no longer an insignificant species on the fringes of Imperial awareness. They were a potential rival, one that had just demonstrated both the capability and the resolve to challenge Imperial dominance. The implications extended far beyond a single defeated fleet. If the humans could develop such capabilities in secret, what other species might be doing the same? The Empire's strategy of projecting invincibility had worked for centuries because it had been, for all practical purposes, true. But now that illusion had been shattered, and the ripples would spread across the galaxy, Arkin knew that the Empire would respond with overwhelming force. It was the only response consistent with Imperial doctrine. Massive fleets would be assembled, plans would be drawn up for the subjugation or even elimination of a human threat. But as he detailed the precision of the human attacks, the coordination of their vessels, and their apparent intimate knowledge of Imperial systems, a troubling question formed in his mind. What if brute force was no longer enough? Meanwhile, on board the Terran Defense Force vessel Intrepid, Captain James Darius stood in a similar posture before his own viewport, watching as his engineers coordinated the recovery of stranded Imperial crew members from their disabled vessels. "We did it, sir," said his executive officer, Commander Elena Reyes, joining him at the viewport. "First contact with the Empire on our terms, not theirs." "We did," Darius acknowledged soberly. "But this is just the beginning. They'll be back, and in much greater numbers." "We knew that would be the case," Reyes reminded him. Project Cassandra predicted their response patterns with 93% accuracy. They'll need time to reorganize, to adjust their strategy. Time we'll use to continue strengthening our position. Darius nodded slowly. Project Cassandra has been right about everything so far. Their tactics, their technology, their psychology. Let's hope it continues to be right about what comes next. Project Cassandra, humanity's greatest secret. For over 50 years, Earth and its colonies had devoted enormous resources to studying the Empire through every available means. Defectors, captured technology, covert observations, signal intelligence, all feeding into an ever-expanding database analyzed by the most advanced artificial intelligence humanity had ever created. While officially maintaining the appearance of a disunited, technologically limited species, humans had been preparing for inevitable conflict with an empire that had never shown any inclination to tolerate genuine independence within its reach. "The Imperial prisoners are secure, Captain," reported the security chief. "Most are still in shock. They can't quite believe what happened." "That was the point," Darius replied. "The psychological impact is as important as the tactical victory. For the first time in centuries, the Empire has been forced to confront the possibility of defeat." He turned from a viewport, facing his senior officers gathered in the briefing room. "What we did today will echo across the galaxy, not just within the Empire, but among all the species that have been subjugated or threatened by Imperial expansion. We've demonstrated that the Empire is not invincible." "And the cost?" asked Dr. Sarah Chun, the ship's chief medical officer. "We've just made ourselves the Empire's primary target. Billions of lives are now at risk." "Billions were already at risk," Darius countered. "The Empire's expansion has never stopped, never slowed. Sooner or later, they would have come for us with their full might, demanding subjugation, not the limited autonomy they've permitted us thus far. At least now, we face them on our terms, with preparations in place." He activated the main display, showing a strategic map of human space. Defenses that had been built in secret over decades were now visible. Orbital platforms, minefields, fleet positions. A perimeter designed with one purpose: to make the cost of Imperial conquest too high to bear. "We don't need to defeat the Empire," Darius continued. "We just need to convince them that subjugating humanity would require resources better spent elsewhere." Today was the first step in that strategy. The officers digested this in silence. They had all been chosen for this mission because they understood the stakes, the careful balance humanity was trying to strike between demonstrating enough strength to deter Imperial aggression while avoiding actions that would provoke the full might of an empire that controlled thousands of worlds. Transmit the battle data to Alliance Command, Darius ordered finally. Every detail, every response, every tactic. The other colonies need to begin their own preparations immediately. The Empire now knows we're a threat. They won't waste time in responding. As his officers dispersed to their duties, Darius remained, studying the strategic display. The Terran Alliance, Earth and its 27 colony worlds, was tiny compared to the vast expanse of the Empire. Their only hope lay in the careful application of technology specifically designed to counter Imperial systems, and in the Empire's own institutional arrogance. Today, humans had done what many thought impossible. They had defeated an Imperial fleet in direct combat. But Darius harbored no illusions about what that victory meant. They had not destroyed the Imperial fleet, merely driven it away. They had revealed capabilities that the Empire would now prepare to counter. The element of surprise, so carefully preserved for decades, had been expended. What came next would be a test of everything humanity had built, everything they had prepared. Not just their weapons and shields, but their resolve, their unity, their willingness to stand against an adversary that had crushed countless civilizations before them. As Darius contemplated the vast, star-filled void beyond the viewport, he allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. For all the uncertainty that lay ahead, humanity had accomplished something monumental. They had served notice to an empire that had grown complacent in its power that a new era was beginning, one in which imperial dominance could no longer be taken for granted. The coming storm would test them all, but for the first time in centuries, the outcome was not predetermined. The future of the galaxy was, at long last, unwritten. In the dimly lit chambers of the Imperial High Command, news of the defeat spread like a virus through the highest echelons of power. Counselors who had never known military failure struggled to comprehend reports of Imperial vessels disabled or destroyed by a species they had classified as minimal threat. Impossible, declared High Counselor Varek, his aged face contorted with disbelief. General Arkin must be mistaken. Humans lack the technological capability to challenge even our smallest battle groups. Admiral Thorin, who had reviewed the tactical data personally, shook her head grimly. The evidence is conclusive, Counselor. The humans employed weapons and defensive systems far beyond our intelligence assessments. They demonstrated intimate knowledge of Imperial tactical doctrines and ship vulnerabilities. This was not luck or desperation. It was a carefully planned and executed operation. How? Demanded another counselor. How could they have developed such capabilities without our knowledge? We have surveillance throughout their systems. Surveillance focused on their officially acknowledged facilities, Thorin pointed out. It appears they have been conducting research and development in secret for decades, possibly dispersed across multiple locations to avoid detection. The implications hung heavy in the ornate chamber. If humans had managed to conceal such significant military development, what else might they be hiding? What other species, previously dismissed as inconsequential, might be building similar capabilities in the shadows of the Empire? This cannot stand, Varek declared finally. The Empire must respond with overwhelming force. We will assemble the largest fleet in Imperial history if necessary, but humanity must be subjugated or eliminated entirely. Admiral Thorin frowned. With respect, Counselor, a direct assault may not be the most effective approach. The humans have demonstrated specific countermeasures to our current systems. A more measured response would allow us time to analyze their capabilities and develop appropriate counters. Measured response? Varek's voice rose incredulously. The Empire does not negotiate with species that attack our vessels. We crush them utterly, as an example to all who might consider defiance. The debate continued for hours, with factions forming around different approaches. Some advocated for immediate, overwhelming military action, the traditional Imperial response to any challenge. Others, particularly those with military experience, urged caution and analysis before committing to a potentially costly conflict. In the end, as it had for centuries, The imperial doctrine of overwhelming force prevailed. Orders were dispatched to assemble a massive armada. Dozens of capital ships, hundreds of cruisers, thousands of fighters. A force that no civilization in known history had withstood. But even as the preparations began, doubts lingered. The humans had revealed capabilities that suggested long-term planning and specific preparation for conflict with the Empire. What other surprises might they have in reserve? What traps might they have laid for the very sort of massive assault the Empire was now planning? For the first time in generations, uncertainty had entered the calculations of Imperial strategy. The unquestioned assumption of Imperial invincibility had been challenged, and the response to that challenge would shape the future of the galaxy. On Earth, in the secure chamber of the Terran Defense Council, similar discussions were underway. Representatives from all 27 human worlds had gathered, some physically present, others attending via secure holographic connections. The atmosphere was tense but determined. Humanity had struck the first blow in what might become the defining conflict of their species' existence. The Seventh Fleet has withdrawn beyond our defensive perimeter, Admiral Helena Winters reported, manipulating the holographic display to show the retreat path of the Imperial forces. Our long-range sensors indicate they're regrouping at their outpost in the Proximus sector. Damage assessment suggests nearly 40% of their combat capability has been neutralized, at least temporarily. President Marcus Chun of the Terran Alliance nodded gravely. And our losses? Minimal, sir. 2 ships with moderate damage, 14 personnel with injuries, no fatalities. The Imperial forces were caught completely unprepared for our defensive capabilities. A murmur ran through the assembled representatives. The disparity in casualties was almost too good to believe. We should understand clearly what we've accomplished and what we haven't, cautioned Director Alara Voss, head of Alliance Intelligence. Her weathered face reflected decades of working in the shadows to prepare for this moment. We've won a single engagement against a fraction of Imperial military power. We've revealed some of our technological advantages, which they will now work furiously to counter. And we've made ourselves the Empire's primary focus in a way we haven't been before. That was inevitable, countered General Thomas Rodriguez, commander of Terran Defense Forces. The Empire has been encroaching on our territory for years. Their tolerance of our independence was always temporary, a convenience until they decided we were worth the effort to fully subjugate. Project Cassandra's projections support that assessment, Voss acknowledged. But the timing of this confrontation was our choice, and now we face the consequences of that choice. The Empire will return, and in much greater force. The holographic display shifted, showing a simulation of Imperial fleet movements. Red markers representing Imperial capital ships converged from across the galaxy, forming an armada of overwhelming proportions. This is what Cassandra predicts, Voss continued. The Empire will assemble the largest military force they can spare from their other commitments. They will seek not just to defeat us, but to make an example of us, to demonstrate to every species in the galaxy what happens when you challenge Imperial authority. President Chun studied the projection, his expression resolute. And our response? General Rodriguez stepped forward. We continue with the strategy that has guided us for the past 50 years. We can't match the Empire ship for ship. We don't need to. Our defensive perimeter is designed to exact such a cost that the Empire will be forced to reconsider the value of subjugating humanity. Defensive perimeter? Questioned the representative from Mars, skepticism evident in her tone. You mean our 27 worlds against their thousands? Their resources are virtually unlimited. Their resources are stretched thin across half the galaxy, Rodriguez corrected. They maintain control through the perception of invincibility, not through actually having overwhelming force everywhere simultaneously. Today, we damaged that perception. Now we need to ensure that any attempt to reassert it against us comes at a price too high for even Imperial pride to bear. The display changed again, revealing the full extent of humanity's preparations. Hidden asteroid bases, automated defense platforms, minefields capable of targeting specific Imperial energy signatures, and the fleet itself, smaller than the Empire's, but designed specifically to exploit Imperial weaknesses. We've been preparing for this moment since we first encountered the Empire, Rodriguez reminded them. Every technological advance, every resource allocation, every diplomatic maneuver has been guided by this eventual confrontation. We are as ready as we can be. President Chen rose from his seat, his gaze moving from one representative to another. What we've done cannot be undone. For better or worse, humanity has declared itself a power to be reckoned with. The question now is not whether we were right to do so, but whether we will stand united in the face of what comes next. One by one, the representatives nodded their assent. Whatever doubts they might harbor about the confrontation with the Empire, they understood the reality. Retreat was no longer an option. The Empire would accept nothing less than complete submission now, and humanity had collectively decided generations ago that submission was a fate worse than conflict. Then we prepare, Chen declared. Every colony, every outpost, every ship. The Empire believes they're facing an upstart species that got lucky against a single fleet. Let them discover just how deeply they've underestimated humanity's resolve. As the meeting adjourned, Captain Darius found himself walking alongside Director Voss through the corridors of Earth's orbital defense headquarters. The older woman had been his mentor when he first joined Alliance Intelligence, long before he transferred to a command position in the fleet. "You did well, James," she said quietly. The engagement went almost exactly as Cassandra predicted. Almost, Darius emphasized. Their tactical response was more rigid than we anticipated. They relied on overwhelming force even when precision would have been more effective. Voss nodded thoughtfully. The Empire's greatest weakness has always been its own success. They've won for so long that they've forgotten how to adapt. But don't assume that will remain true. They'll learn from this defeat. And we'll learn from our victory, Darius replied. Every piece of data, every tactical response, it all feeds back into Cassandra's models. We grow stronger with each engagement. I hope it's enough. Voss stopped, turning to face him directly. The next encounter won't be like this one, James. They'll come prepared for the capabilities you revealed today. The advantage of surprise is gone. Darius met her gaze steadily. We didn't expect to win this war with a single battle, Ilera. This was just the opening move in a very long game. A game where the stakes are the survival of our species, she reminded him soberly. Which is why we'll win, he assured her with quiet confidence. Because we have to. Weeks passed as both sides prepared for the inevitable next phase of the conflict. On Imperial worlds across the galaxy, the official narrative described the encounter as a minor setback caused by unexpected tactics, soon to be rectified by the full might of Imperial power. But in private communications and secure military channels, a different story emerged. One of genuine concern about human capabilities and the potential cost of subduing them. General Arkin found himself in the uncomfortable position of being both scapegoat and essential witness. His defeat had made him a convenient target for those seeking to minimize the significance of the human threat, yet his first-hand experience made him invaluable to those tasked with planning the Imperial response. They knew our systems, he explained for what felt like the 100th time, addressing a council of Imperial strategists. Not just our general capabilities, but specific vulnerabilities, points that should have been classified at the highest levels. "You suggest espionage, then?" asked Strategic Commander Lorith, a veteran of campaigns against the Andari Confederacy. "Human infiltration of our military databases?" "Possibly," Arkin acknowledged, "but I believe it's more systematic than that. Consider how long humans have been permitted limited access to Imperial worlds for trade and labor. Consider how many of our obsolete systems are sold to frontier worlds where humans might examine them. They've been studying us, piece by piece, for decades. And we have allowed it," Lorith concluded grimly, "because we consider them insignificant." The admission hung heavily in the air. Imperial doctrine had always classified species by their apparent threat level, allocating surveillance and containment resources accordingly. Humans have been deemed a minimal threat, capable of interstellar travel but lacking both the unity and technology to pose a serious challenge to Imperial power. That assessment had now been proven catastrophically wrong. The question, continued another strategist, is how to respond. The High Command has ordered the assembly of a punitive fleet of unprecedented size. But if the humans have indeed been preparing for conflict with us specifically, they may have additional surprises in store. They will, Arkin stated with certainty. What we encountered was not a lucky improvisation. It was the product of long-term, dedicated preparation. Every system on their ships was designed with Imperial technology in mind. They won't have revealed all their capabilities in a single engagement. Then what do you suggest, General? Delay? Negotiation? Such concepts are alien to Imperial doctrine. Arkin chose his words carefully, aware that what he was about to propose bordered on heresy by Imperial standards. I suggest we reconsider our assumptions. If humans have been systematically preparing for conflict with the Empire, they will have defenses in depth. The cost of subjugating them through conventional means may be higher than we've initially calculated. The Empire does not shirk from costs when its authority is challenged, Lorith reminded him sternly. No, Arkin agreed, but it also does not waste resources unnecessarily. Consider, if we commit our full might against the humans and suffer significant losses, even if we ultimately prevail, what message does that send to the Andari, the Valyrians, and others who watch for signs of Imperial weakness? What opportunities might we create elsewhere while our forces are committed to this campaign? The strategic implications were clear, though uncomfortable. The Empire maintained control over its vast territories not by having overwhelming force everywhere simultaneously, but by creating the perception that resistance was futile. If subjugating humanity came at a visible, significant cost, that perception might be damaged throughout the galaxy. You're suggesting we might need to reconsider our approach to humans entirely, one of the younger strategists ventured. Perhaps even acknowledge them as a legitimate power. The very idea seemed to cause physical discomfort among some of the older commanders. The Empire had not acknowledged any species as a true equal in centuries. To do so with humans, a species they had dismissed as barely worth notice, would be unprecedented. I suggest, Arkin replied carefully, that we gather more intelligence before committing to a full-scale invasion. The humans revealed some capabilities in our encounter, but certainly not all of them. We should know what we're truly facing before we decide how to respond. The debate continued for hours, but eventually a modified strategy began to take shape. The punitive fleet would still be assembled. Imperial pride demanded no less, but its deployment would be preceded by extensive reconnaissance and intelligence gathering. Probing attacks would test human defenses, attempting to reveal more of their capabilities before committing to a full-scale assault. It was not the immediate, overwhelming response that Imperial doctrine would normally dictate, but it acknowledged a reality that was becoming increasingly clear. Humanity represented a new kind of challenge, one that might require new thinking to address effectively. As the Imperial strategists dispersed, Commander Zorva approached Arkin privately. That was dangerously close to advocating restraint, General, she observed quietly. Some might interpret it as sympathy for the humans. Not sympathy, Arkin corrected. Respect. They defeated us through careful planning and precise execution. To assume we can simply overwhelm them with brute force would be to repeat the same arrogance that led to our defeat in the first place. And if the High Command insists on the traditional approach, full commitment to crushing them utterly, Arkin gazed out at the stars visible through the station's viewport. Then I will execute those orders to the best of my ability. But I will do so with the understanding that we face an adversary unlike any the Empire has encountered in generations. One that has studied us, prepared for us, and proven willing to stand against us despite knowing the potential consequences. Zorva studied him thoughtfully. You almost sound like you admire them. Perhaps I do, Arkin admitted. They've accomplished something I would have thought impossible. Whatever happens next, they force the Empire to take notice of them, to recognize them as more than just another species to be casually subjugated when convenient. And that recognition may cost millions of lives on both sides, Zorva pointed out. Yes, Arkin agreed solemnly. The price of challenging the Empire has always been high. But for the first time in my lifetime, I find myself wondering if the price of Imperial expansion might be higher than we've calculated. It was a dangerous thought, one that bordered on disloyalty by Imperial standards. But as he contemplated the coming conflict, Arkin couldn't escape the conclusion that the galaxy was changing. The certainties that had guided Imperial expansion for centuries were no longer quite so certain. Humanity had done more than win a battle. They had introduced doubt into an empire built on absolute confidence. And in that achievement lay the potential for transformation that extended far beyond a single species or a single conflict. The stars that had once seemed to represent the unquestioned domain of the Empire now held a new possibility. A future where power was not absolute, where dominance was not guaranteed, where the unwritten rules that had governed galactic affairs for centuries might finally be rewritten. It was a future that would be forged in the crucible of the coming conflict, a test of will and preparation between an empire that had never known true defeat and a species that had spent generations preparing for this moment. The outcome would reshape the galaxy one way or another. And as both sides made their preparations, as fleets were assembled and defenses reinforced, as strategies were developed and contingencies planned, the stars themselves seemed to wait in anticipation of what would come next in this unexpected new chapter of galactic history.